We're recording for Molly. All right. So, really quick, like Molly just asked, I don't have any virtual students in this class, so I don't regularly record this class. If you know that you're going to be absent, if you give me an email in the morning or sometime before third hour, I will record it, and then I can send just the link to you if you need it to keep up. So, and I don't mind doing it. And but I just need to know I'm not recording it all the time because I have to record everything else, and it just gives me a break not to have to process that video. So, all right. So here's where we're at. Thursday is our test, so we need to get finished with these notes. We should either finish them today or they should definitely be finished tomorrow. I'm going to try really hard to finish them today so you don't have to listen to anything tomorrow, and you can just take your quizzes. Thursday, we'll take our test. Friday, we'll do test corrections. And those of you that turn all your assignments in on Thursday, that means you have a lovely fall break without worrying about the baby calling out your name and screaming at you.
We're singing the song Little Nurse Singers, and every time somebody says baby, I'm like,
Yo, don't talk about that baby. All right. So we're on page 3, getting ready to look at Charles I. Charles I is going to be the monarch that gets his head removed from his shoulders. He's really going to be the first monarch to have that done by his own people, which is, again, fairly significant. So Charles is the son of James I. Like James, he claims this divine right, and he even more so than James, right? So James believes in this divine right, and James is always kind of this wink, wink kind of king, right? He's like, yeah, I got divine authority, wink, wink kind of thing, like, yeah. Charles is not that. Charles is full force into this. He is very devoutly religious. He has absolute authority for him as king. And he also is seeking to control the Church of England. Like, this is my church. I'm the head of it. I need to be in control of it. I need to do that. He says, I don't need Parliament. If I'm a king, I don't need anyone's help. And so one of the things that he starts is trying to raise taxes. And again, all of these kings are fighting lots of wars. It takes a lot of money to fight wars. And so the only way that you can get money as a king is through taxes. There is no other way you can get money. And so he starts to tax Charles, and he does it without Parliament's authority. So what? So Parliament says, you can't do that, Charles. You got to go through Parliament. You can't just raise taxes without asking us. He's going to arrest some of the nobles for refusing to pay. And by 1628, both houses, and that's really critical, both houses of Parliament are opposed to the king. So that's the House of Commons, which kind of makes sense because they're the one paying the taxes, but also the House of Lords, the nobles, are really upset with the king and say, we got to fix something about this relationship, king, because as my granny would say, you're getting a little bit too big for your britches, and we need to take you down a notch. And so Parliament creates the Petition of Right. And Parliament attempted to encourage the king to grant basic legal rights in return for granting taxes. So Parliament is a government entity, and they know that in order to get what you want, you got to give up some stuff. So Parliament says, look, king, you want a tax, we want this. Let's have this little agreement thing that we get what we want, you get what you want, and everything will be okay. So the provisions. Only Parliament had the right to levy taxes, gifts, or loans or contributions. No one should be imprisoned or detained without due process of law. Everyone had the right to habeas corpus. Habeas corpus translates kind of loosely into show me the body, that you have a trial. Habeas corpus means you got to tell me why I'm here. Show me the body. no forced quartering of soldiers in the homes of private citizens, and martial law could not be declared in peacetime. Now, for those of you that know anything about the Constitution of the United States of America, do you know how many of these little things are in our Constitution and our Bill of Rights? B, C, D, and E. They're all in our Constitution.
Wait, which one? Is it that? That's the third
B,
amendment?
C, D, and E. Only Parliament has a right to that. Yeah, that's in our Constitution as well. Actually, all of them.
Is D the third amendment?
All actually, I misspoke. A, B, C, D, and E. That's all in the United States Constitution.
But is D the third amendment?
Yeah, that's your Third Amendment right to not have to quarter. It's in there that you don't have to quarter. It is because as our people in the colonies were British, they lived under this for a long time. And when they set out to right all of these wrongs in writing the Constitution in 1789, these are some of the things that they're fixing. 200 years later, these are things that are still bothering the colonists. So yes, you have a constitutional right if the United States Army knocks on your door and says, hey, can we put a few soldiers in your backyard? You can say, nope, you may not. You don't have to. Everybody has a right to a trial. You cannot be imprisoned or detained without due process. So in the state of Indiana, you can be arrested, but you have to be charged with a crime within 72 hours, or they have to release you. It's why the wheels of justice to some people appear to move really slow, because the justice and law enforcement have to have everything just right, because they get one shot. And if they mess up, they don't get another shot at it. So what does Charles do? Oh,
what is martial law cannot be declared in peacetime? I mean, like,
martial law can't be. So during times of peace, why would you need martial law? Like, why would you need to call the military to protect people? That's what they're saying. Like, there's no reason to do that, Charles. And you're not going to put troops on our streets in peacetime. There's no need. So Charles says, here's my response to that. All of you go home. Parliament dissolved. Go home. But Parliament has continued to meet and said, we're not going to do that. We're not going to just go home. Charles says, yes, you are. Go home. So at the top of page 4, Charles rules without Parliament between 1629 and 1640. So for about 10 years, he rules with no government oversight. And that's great if you're Charles. No one to check any of his taxes. So he ruled as an absolute monarch for these 11 years. He raised money using medieval forms of taxation. He has counties pay to outfit ships, where only usually that went to counties on the coast. And he starts to persecute Puritans a lot. Religious persecution of Puritans became the biggest reason for the English Civil War. On page 4, we have that short Parliament, long Parliament. You do not need to know in depth any of those things. But what Charles does is reconvenes them until in the short Parliament in 1640. And when they refuse to grant him, he disbands them after a month. So in 1640, he's like, all right, we're going to try this again, people. We're going to all get together. When I get you together, you need to get me some taxes. They don't do it. So he says, after a month, everybody go back home. You're still not doing what I want. So again, desperate, he tries again. And this time he says Parliament could not be dissolved without its own consent, and that Parliament had to meet every 3 years. Ship money is abolished. The leaders of the persecution will be tried and executed. Star Chamber will be abolished. Common courts. And the Puritans came to represent the majority in Parliament against the king. So the long Parliament gets all these things that they want. And then flip the page. And when long Parliament gets in there, they decide, we're just going to go to war. We're done with Charles. We're done with Charles and all the things that he's been doing. So the immediate cause, yes?
was there nothing like breaking in to like back of like a law back then where it was like we could get rid of him without.
No. There's nothing. The only thing they have at this point guiding their country is the Magna Carta, and that doesn't say anything. That doesn't say anything. Yeah, that doesn't say anything about. It just says the king has to follow the rules of everyone else, and there's no one really to oversee that. Yes.
So, are the Puritans the one that say that it's like against their religion to pay the taxes?
That's Quakers.
That's Quakers. Okay,
Yes.
So why are they?
Why do they persecute Puritans?
Yeah.
They want to purify the church. They want to remember the Church of England is not that different than the Catholic Church. It's if we as non-Catholics went to a Church of England and even as a non-practicing Catholic, it would feel like the Catholic Church to you. Like if you've ever watched any royal monarch get married, it's very much like a Catholic wedding. I mean, the archbishop is there. They kneel before yes, ma'am. You would definitely understand. There would be some weirdness, but you would definitely get everything that they're doing. It's
It would just be like going to a different state and having like a church that does it a little different.
right. You would understand everything. To us, it would still appear like a Catholic. It would kind of be like have you ever been to a Presbyterian church? So if you go to a Presbyterian church, it's very much the only thing that's going to be missing is weekly communion, but they're still called to worship, confession, say the doxology, say the Nicene, or depending on, I think we say the Apostles' Creed every Sunday and the Nicene Creed on communion. It's followed up by praise God from whom all blessings flow. Don't you guys sing that? Praise creatures are here below. Praise them all. Okay. But it would be very similar so that you would at least know, like you could at least follow along with the Apostles' Creed. And the sermon would feel very much a comfortable sermon for you. It's really just the gospel. Same thing, not the fire and damnation. Like if you listen to music, you're going to hell, and it would be that part would feel very similar to you. Yes.
So, how is confession held? Is it like you go in anytime you want?
Oh, let's talk about that at the end. We'll talk about confession. You mean in the Catholic Church?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a planned time? Do you go in?
Yeah, there's confession. The priest has to listen to you confess, and you can go whenever. And usually you have to, before you take communion, you have to confess. You have to go to confession.
Like you might have to say that in front of the entire, or is it? Well, I know.
Oh, no,
there's
it's
that
in a little
box.
box.
Well, I know
Yeah.
there's that box.
Yeah, it's a
Or
box.
You can either do it face to face or behind a curtain or a door.
Yeah.
Or something.
But-
And you start, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been 365 days since my last confession. And then
You do it once a year.
you go once a year.
But
It makes me uncomfortable.
Okay, so you do really say it's been 365 days since my last
They don't
confession.
ask that.
Oh, you don't have to say that anymore?
No.
Okay.
But it's
But-
weird to sit down with an old man in a dark room and be like, "Oh yeah, I did this.
Yeah.
I know it's wrong."
Yeah. And then after you say what you did, then you're given acts of contrition, and then you walk out usually into the church and complete that by yourself.
I feel like it's very
So,
easy to lie.
if you
I
have
would
that,
lie.
like maybe you have to do it every week, can you not take communion if you haven't done that?
You're not supposed to, I don't think.
Okay, so you can't just be like,
Yeah.
and then like
Yeah.
bottoms up.
I didn't know that you could call the priest like my
You
father,
know, whisper it,
like
Uh-huh.
you know,
normally.
whisper it
Uh-huh.
to the priest
So
ear and
this
go, thank you,
Taylor
bud.
came in on the
Take a
door, so I was
shot.
waiting on him, and she comes in and she's like, "Oh, is
Oh,
this gonna
Nora
be, what?
was talking about him.
No,
Oh.
this table comes in,
Mhm.
and I have to wait on him." And I was like asking how many, she said, "It's gonna be me, my husband, and like father or something." And I was like, "Oh, you're that?"
Yeah, they call him Father.
And so I was
Mhm.
like, "Oh, you're my dad or something," and she dies laughing. I'm like,
Yeah.
like, sorry.
Yeah.
And I was in the back, like, and then every time I came out, she started dying laughing. So I was in the back, like, begging Pep to take this table.
Oh, did you tell him why? Because I bet if you told him why, he would not have taken it for you.
Yeah, I told him why I needed to.
Yeah. No, that's part of the big thing that we didn't really talk about in the Reformation because it doesn't fit into
So bad.
our subject area, but that's one of the big differences between Protestants and Catholics. Protestants don't believe that you need a conduit to confess your sins to God. Catholics believe that you need this intermediary to help you deal with your confessions and then give you something to do to absolve you of your sins. And so that was, yes.
So Puritans wanted to reform the English.
Yes, so let's get back to that. Puritans want to reform the English church,
So
the
they
Church
don't
of England.
What Martin
They
Luther
think
did
it's-
to Catholics.
Yes, they think it's too popish. Oh, they definitely don't like Catholics, but the Church of England is too popish. So that would be things like stained glass still in the church. It would be things like a crucifix still hanging in the church. It would be priests still turned to the back with their backs facing the congregation. It would still be things like prayer. Not that's changed in 1964. In 1964, Vatican II changes that. So if you went to Mass in 1960, number one, it would be in Latin, the whole thing in Latin. And number two, the priests would have their back. But you would understand it because you have been going all your life.
But I wouldn't know what the words meant.
Yeah, you would.
Would I?
You would.
You get
Okay, this is gonna sound weird because I am Catholic, but why did they turn their back? Like, why?
To venerate the altar, right? That God's at the front and what's always up there is a crucifix, right? So that's the most important part. And that's a difference. The most important part of the church is not the congregation. Protestants feel the most important part of the church is the congregation. Catholics feel the most important part of the church is the presence of Christ. Right? And that's a very simple,
Doesn't it feel rude?
that's a very simple, but I'm sure Father would love to help and answer that for you.
It comes into very similar, like all the time.
Ask him when he comes through. Hey, Father,
Just like
why?
go to the
Okay.
microphone.
There was a nun in the drive-thru.
Nuns are so cool.
Nuns are really
She
awesome.
wasn't driving, but
I'm going to
Did
just
they have a
throw
nun
this
club?
out. Nuns are the first feminists. I'm just throwing that out. They're
Nuns
awesome.
are amazing.
None
They
of us
are.
normal.
It was just
Just-
weird to see a nun eating like a
Yeah. Was she in a habit?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's their choice these days, or the order that they belong to. So, all right, let's get back to this because we need to finish these. All right, sorry, Molly. All right, so Charles tries to arrest Puritans in Parliament. He tries to arrest them in Parliament. Bad mistake, because most of Parliament at this point is Puritan. Crowds of 4,000 comes to the Parliament's defense. March 1642, Charles declares war against his opponents in Parliament. So Charles starts the English Civil War. He declares war on his opponents. Now, was he really going to declare war? I mean, was he really going to actively participate? Don't know. But he does get this army. His army comes from the nobility, rural county gentry, and mercenaries. And we now have a civil war. Cavaliers or Cavaliers or royalists support the king. And that is a group you need to know who they are. Clergy, supporters of the Anglican Church, the majority of the old gentry, Irish Catholics. They don't like Puritanism. Catholics can get along with the Church of England. They cannot get along with Puritans. It's why when we have these little 13 colonies, they kick Catholics out everywhere, which is why they have to make the colony of Maryland, because they get kicked out. Yes.
Who's the group that we need to find
Cavaliers are loyalist. Loyal to the king, are royalist. 3B, Roundheads. Those are Calvinist. Those are parliamentarians. Those are headed by Oliver Cromwell. They are Puritans. They allied with Scotland, supported by Presbyterians, comprised a majority of businessmen, included a few nobles, not much, and had the support of the Navy and the Merchant Marines. And this is, the Roundheads are led by Oliver Cromwell, a fierce Puritan and a military leader a really, really good military leader. He creates this new model army, which is based on drills. There's a book that they have to follow. He recreates this army that becomes more successful than Charles's army. So Charles surrendered himself to the Scots. Parliament ordered the army to disband. Cromwell refuses. Cromwell wins. At the bottom of page 5, Pride's Purge. He takes Cromwell takes the Parliament, and then he gets rid of everybody that's not Puritan. Sounds kind of like an absolutist Charles thing. So I'm going to get rid of everybody that doesn't think like me. And then on page 6, Charles's head is cut off. And this ends the English Civil War. So what ends the English Civil War? Charles getting his head cut off. There's our 3 groups again, our levelers, our diggers, and our Quakers. Levelers level out and everybody's equal in society. Diggers, nobody owns land, it's owned by the state. Quakers rejected church authority, pacifists. And C is the one thing that they really are persecuted for, that they allow women to play a role in preaching. Yes.
Did levelers think everyone was equal, or was it like a white landowning man type situation?
Well, if you think of England, England is only at this point men. It is only men in that aspect. It's men, not women. Certainly not women as part of this egalitarian society. Men.
So the one that thought everyone was equal wasn't the one that allowed women to.
Right, not women. Which is why they don't like Quakers, because women are allowed to play a role in preaching. In a Quaker church, no one really preaches. Everyone just talks. But the fact that women are allowed to speak and talk about religion is what makes people really upset with the Quakers. So on page 6, we've got this review again, because we've already discussed this in that first set of notes. Cromwell turns this into a protectorate in which he calls himself the Lord Protector. And we now have a dictatorship, which is not really that different than Charles I. He dissolves Parliament too. He divides England into 12 districts. He denied religious freedom to Anglicans and Catholics, but Jews will be allowed to return. This should all sound familiar because we've already discussed this pretty much in depth. England invades Ireland. Cromwell conquers Scotland. And now the new stuff that we're going to get to is, how do we get rid of this? Because we know now, in the 21st century, England is back to a monarch. They are not a Lord Protectorate or a dictatorship. And what happens after Cromwell dies is his son is not effective. So Cromwell's going to die. And the Stuarts, Charles II, escaped to the continent. He's been hanging out in courts all throughout Europe, being supported by different monarchs, mostly in Belgium, in Fleming. So while in exile, Charles agreed to abide by Parliament's decision. And what we get is the restoration of Charles II. It's called the Restoration Throne. And that Charles is going to agree that power is not absolute. Charles agreed to a significant degree of religious toleration, especially for Catholics. And he is known as the Merry Monarch. Everybody loves Charles II. He walks out amongst the public. He walks through Hyde Park. He stays and helps put out the fire, the Great Fire of London. He has lots of mistresses. Everybody really likes Charles II. We developed 2 political parties that we're going to look at for a while. The Tories, nobles, gentry, Anglicans, they are conservative, and the Whigs, middle-class Puritans, liberal. At the bottom of page 7, The Clarendon Code, and this is really important. I would put a box around this. Instituted in 1661 by monarchists and Anglicans to get rid of all Puritans. This is when the United States colonies become overwhelmed with Puritans because they all have to leave. The Test Act of 1673 excluded those unwilling to receive the sacrament of the Church of England from voting, holding office, preaching, teaching, attending universities, or assembling. So if you're a Puritan, you don't get to do any of those things. Yes.
So that was under Charles II.
Yep. Uh-huh.
So everybody really liked Charles II except for Puritans.
Puritans. Yep. Nobody likes Puritans. Let's just say that.
Okay.
No one likes Puritans. No one likes Puritans. Yes.
You said that it's the
Clarendon Code, the Test Act of 1673, that says Puritans excluded from just about everything. In essence, we're saying Puritans, get out. Go to those colonies. Go to Massachusetts Bay. Make their life a living heck, in which they do. Charles does seem to support Catholicism, and he does. Drew criticism from the Whigs, but here's why, and here's what he does. Granted freedom of worship to Catholics. Made a deal with Louis XIV and gives France money. France would give money to England every year if he stops being mean to Catholics. Charles is like, sure, I can do that. Throw me some money. Charles dissolved Parliament when it passed a law denying royal succession to Catholics because James, his brother, is a Catholic. And guess what he does when he's dying? Guess what? I'm a Catholic. Give me last rites quick before I die. Like Henry VIII, and like Henry of Navarre.
Yeah.
I'm a Catholic. Yep. Henry VIII does the same. So, Charles II, much like all of these Stuarts, lots of mistresses that have babies, but unfortunately, he picks a wife that doesn't. And so, on his death, the throne goes to his brother, James II. James II is his brother, not his son, who is Catholic, out loud Catholic, not secret, and has married a French Catholic. His first wife dies. He has 2 children. Oh, wait, let me do this. Okay. Parliament passed habeas corpus, and the provision of habeas corpus, judges demand that prisoners be in court during their trials, require just cause for continued imprisonment, provided for speedy trials, and forbid double jeopardy. Again, all of these things are going to be in our Constitution. Double jeopardy, you can't be charged for the same crime. That, again, is why the wheels of justice have to move slow, because they get one shot. If you get tried for murder and the justice system don't have all their ducks in a row and you're acquitted, you can stand on the courthouse and say, y'all are dumb. I killed him. I popped a cap in him. And nothing can happen to you. Nothing. Nothing. One of the most famous cases of this involved Emmett Till, a 15-year-old African-American that went to Mississippi, and 2 30-plus white men beat him to death, tied him to a swamp cooler, a big air conditioner, and threw him in the Chattahoochee River. They found him, put him on trial. 10 of his peers said in about 10 minutes, said, you're not guilty. And then as soon as the trial was over, they went out. And the reason we know all this is because they sold their story to Life magazine. So not only were they acquitted of a murder, they gave a interview to Life magazine. You can look it up and read the article in which they explained exactly what they did. And you can't be acquitted. So that's why the wheels of justice have to move slow, because they are there for the protection. So every time we think about that, we need to think about the fact in Mexico, you can be arrested and put in prison and never told why, right? In Indiana, we've got 72 hours. They have to charge you with a crime or release you. So at the bottom, Charles II inherits the throne, and he wants to return England to Catholicism. Holy moly, here we go again. He appoints Catholics to high positions, governments, colleges. But this time, England says, oh, no, you don't. Not going to happen. And on the top of page 9, we have this thing called the Glorious Revolution. It is glorious, and England calls it glorious for 2 reasons. 1, no bloodshed. This is a revolution that has 0 people die. And England calls it the Glorious Revolution because it ends Catholicism in England. This is it. No more deep sighs, Maggie. We're done. Or Maddie, we're done. So the Glorious Revolution was the final act in the struggle for political sovereignty in England. Sovereignty means who rules. Parliament said, we are done. We got to figure this out. We want this. We're not going to do this absolute monarchy thing. Charles, we cut off your dad's head for this. Did you not get the idea and the memo that we don't want this? So James's reissue of the Declaration of Indulgence, granting freedom of worship to Catholics, and birth of a Catholic heir. Now, I would write to the side, because this isn't anywhere in your note, James has 2 daughters that are Protestant, Mary and Anne. He has 2 Protestant daughters. He marries again, and when his French Catholic wife has a son, then we're in trouble because he immediately becomes the heir. The son jumps over the 2 daughters. So there comes a plot. Parliament says, we got to get rid of this. The daughters say, oh, how can we help? Because we don't really like our dad either. We certainly don't like his wife, and we don't like the fact that he's Catholic and has had a son. So, gee, we'd like to help get rid of our dad. Yes.
What'd you say to right out to the side?
Anne and Mary are the daughters. They're Protestant. So Parliament invites Mary's husband, the Dutch stadtholder William of Orange, to assume the throne. So Parliament just says, hey, Mary's husband, come on over. And while you're coming, how about you bring a big old army? So William agrees to do that, and he prepares to invade Holland. He's bringing his army. Mary, and I'm making this up just to make a story here, people. Yes? Yeah, he's going to invade them. Hold on. I'm sorry. No, he's coming from Holland to invade. So this part of the story I just like to make up. So Mary goes to her dad and says, hey, Dad, guess what? We don't like you. We want to get rid of you. My husband and I are going to take over. He's got an army that he's bringing. You got 2 choices. You can either just leave, go on, go out the door, go someplace Catholic, or you can bring war to England. And he decides, I probably better leave. And so he leaves. James fled to France. And William and Mary are declared joint sovereigns by Parliament. Joint sovereigns. They rule as one, William and Mary. Now, this isn't part of our story, part of our notes, but what's going to happen is James is going to take his son to France, and then that son, who clearly has a legal right to the throne, is going to keep coming back and trying to get in. I don't really want to know if any of you watch this show, because it is got a lot of stuff in it, but does anybody watch Outlander? Okay. And the Bonnie Prince, the pretender, this is James's son. Thank you for not watching that, because there's a lot of stuff in that. A lot. Yeah?
So does that kind of mean that political power is moving away from religion
Yeah, it will. We're getting there. So what William and Mary have to do in order to assume the throne is sign the English Bill of Rights. You need a big old box around all this stuff. Oh. I'm going to try to go fast as I can. William and Mary accepted what becomes the English Bill of Rights. And England becomes a constitutional monarchy. That's what England is. They have a monarch and they have a constitution, and everyone has to abide by that. This becomes the hallmark for constitutionalism. The provisions of this are important. The king cannot be Catholic. I'm fairly certain Queen Elizabeth still has not changed this. Laws could only be made with the consent of the government. Parliament, please don't mistake this. People in England do not have free speech yet. This is just Parliament. Parliament has a right of free speech. Standing army in peacetime, not legal. Taxation was illegal without parliamentary approval. On the top of page 10, excessive bail, cruel and unusual punishments are prohibited. That is also in the United States Constitution. Right by trial by jury, due process, reasonable bail in our Constitution. People have the right to bear arms in our Constitution, except Catholics. In England, if you're Catholic, you can't bear arms.
Still?
Oh, no, that's gone.
Oh, okay.
Provided for free elections to Parliament, and people had the right to petition. Petition means to address the government. The Glorious Revolution did not amount to democratic revolution. Power still remains with nobility and gentry, and that's why I was clear in saying free speech was not to the people, it's to Parliament, that they could speak to the king however they needed to and not die. Because Parliament represents the upper classes. The majority of English people did not have a say. And the most notable defense of the Glorious Revolution comes from John Locke. And we'll meet him again. Toleration Act granted right to worship for Protestants, though they could not hold office. Do not extend rights and liberties to Catholics, Jews, or Unitarians. So no religious liberties to Catholics or Jews or Unitarians. And then we have an act of settlement, meaning who's going to succeed. If William or his sister-in-law Anne died without children, the crown would pass to the granddaughter of James I, who is German. This is where we're going to get the George, the Hanoverians. When Anne died in 1714, the Hanovers will assume the crown as George I, and that's where we'll get those people. All right, I'm going to do this little teeny bit tomorrow. So you're just going to have to listen to 2 quick pages of notes tomorrow because I don't want to get all that too much
So
because we got to do the Dutch.
is the act of settlement kind of
The act of settlement is secession. Who's going to succeed the throne?
so,
All right,
so that's setting up
who comes
family
after?
lines?
Yep. Everybody want to say bye to Molly?
Bye, Molly.
Bye, Molly.